Yeah, that's fine.
Let's let's get things started. Thank you everybody for attending today. We have the pleasure of having Lynn Ware, who's been a longtime partner of Vital Learning, take you through hiring for 2021 and beyond. So Lynn is the CEO of Integral Talent Systems. She's been in the HR world for 35 years, so she has a lot of experience, especially as it relates to hiring, onboarding, retaining talent. And so we wanted to welcome Lynn today to share some of her thoughts and her expertise and advice on the topic of hiring in 2021. And if you've had the chance to attend some prior webinars that we've had over the last couple months, we've talked about the future of work and the hybrid workplace, how this recent pandemic is going to affect things, not just in the short term, but in the longer term as well, and how that's going to change a lot of workforces and how people interact with their employer. It also, is going to affect various things as it relates to change management and company culture. So those are a couple topics we covered in the prior webinar. And kind of in that broad category of the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic, both short-term and long-term, we wanted to touch on the topic of hiring as well. And no better person to talk about this than Lynn Ware, who, like I said, brings extensive experience in that field. And so she's going to talk about hiring for 2021 and beyond. So with that, Lynn, please take it away.
Great. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Todd. And I'm so pleased to have been invited to be part of the Vital Learning community once again. It's been a little while since I've been able to attend some of the meetings you've had and product launches in the past and all of that. So we've, as Todd mentioned, we've had a long-term history with your organization. And we're back again with some insights around what COVID has done to our work situation and where we're going next year. So what we're going to cover today is a little bit more insight into this idea of the hybrid work environment and what the quote unquote new normal is or future of work. More importantly, what the impact of that future work is going to have on your hiring and onboarding, because if you're going to prepare for 2021, we already have Halloween upon us, right? And so it's behooves us to take a look at what types of changes or incremental tweaks we want to make to the existing way we hire and onboard people, that so we have a relevant and positive employee experience for the new people we bring on next year. And finally, some of the considerations that either yourself or your clients, if you're an affiliate of Vital Learning, could be considering right now to plan for that next year. So just as far as some realities, I still hear people talking about when this all is over, when the pandemic's over, and when we go back to normal, quote unquote. So I don't think, based on what we're hearing from our clients and also reading in surveys that have been done and other types of information that we become aware of, that we're going back to the way things were. And here's why. Right now, at least according to a top economist at Stanford, 42% of the US labor force is working from home. I've heard estimates from other people of up to 60%, so, or 66% in some cases. So we don't know the exact number, but many people have been working from home for 7 months now. And it's interesting, as human beings, we're so adaptable. Many people are getting quite comfortable with it and have learned how to do it. So the question is, how many people will want to go back to an office when there are therapeutics and a vaccine available to us? That's an open question. And we're going to ask you that question in just a minute. So then we have some information from University of Chicago, who's done some analysis of all the different job roles that exist. And they're estimating that up to 40% of all jobs could be done from home if somebody wanted to do them from home. In addition, some top consulting firms, in this case, Willis Towers Watson, has predicted that at least 20% plus will continue to work from home post-COVID. And many people are already, if they're already quote unquote coming back to work, they're going into the office maybe a couple days a week and working from home the other part of the week. So there's going to be this configuration of remote versus on-premises or field people working in different ways and configurations, right? So this has a lot of implications, but before we move to that, we wanted to do a very quick poll just with people who are attending today's session to find out what percentage of employees you think, this is an opinion, will be working remotely post-COVID. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and tell us what you think. Okay. So it looks like most of us, or it's kind of split, but think at least 20 to 40%. We'll go ahead and share the results here. Most of us think that either up to 20 or up to 40% of the employees will be working remotely next year. Only one person says no remote work planned. So again, it depends what kind of work or job you have. Some jobs can't be done remotely. Obviously, for example, if you're in healthcare, that's kind of difficult, although even there, we're seeing more telehealth visits and things like that. So the reason for the poll is to go ahead and try to decide what the implications are from this type of experience. In addition to people working remotely, another thing that's going to be happening, according to executives who have been looking at rehiring or once there is more of a growth curve happening in the economy, how they're going to ramp up. And people are saying that there's a lot of uncertainty obviously out there. So they're probably going to ramp up initially with what they call transitory talent, or in other words, more contractors, maybe temporary part-time people as they see the need for providing more services to their customers. So this also has implications on your hiring and onboarding processes, because you're going to be saying, okay, if we're only going to hire somebody as a contractor, do we put them through the entire selection process that we normally have for full-time employees? Or how are we going to onboard these people? How extensively is that going to go, and how's that going to look when some of these people maybe will convert to full-time if we can justify it by our business results? So these are all questions that need to be answered, and you probably don't have a 100% crystal ball to be able to know for sure what you're going to do, but you have to plan for a few different scenarios at a minimum. In addition, we also know that as a result of the pandemic, that the whole digital transformation that was occurring before March actually increased in speed, right? So because so many people have been working from home, the need for technology and tools to help us do that has expanded. I mean, I bet we all wish we owned Zoom stock at this point in time, just as one example. So what it means is that people that have scarce skills, especially around IT and digital design and development work, will be even more in demand, and already are, than they ever have been in the past. So this is all something to consider with your selection process and recruiting process as well, because maybe now your employment branding or your employee value proposition needs to change and be modified in order for you to be able to be attractive to those people who you might want to have come to work for you. So, what are the implications? Well, we know that due to this hybrid workforce, that there's going to be significant change in what we're looking for, not only the processes we're using, but the types of people. If up to 40% or more people will be working remotely, what are some of the attributes that we now need to be concerned about that we didn't really need before, right? So we're going to take a look at that. In addition, um, we need to think about, for people we're trying to recruit, or even the top talent you already have in your organization, what are they going to want? Are they going to want to stay at home and work? Are they going to want to live in other locations? I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley here in California. I'm in Palo Alto, and I can tell you that many of the high tech companies here, first of all, are not even thinking about having people come back to an office setting until next fall or even the end of next year. And they've already started to move people around the country because they've found that people can do their jobs from wherever they are. They don't have to be in an office location. So I have two clients, in fact, that recently moved from the Bay Area, where I am, one to a small town in Michigan. She's at a VP level in a large company, and her boss is basically saying, okay, you've proven that you could do your job from anywhere, so fine. If you want to live there, you still have your job. Have another one who moved from here to North Carolina for similar reasons. And that was something that would not have been approved or seen as a positive or even doable thing before the pandemic. And I expect we're going to see a lot more of that, especially people here in our area are moving out of San Francisco because of the high cost of living and moving elsewhere because they have this option of being able to work remotely. So this is going to have to be something, looking at your telecommuting policies and your flexible work plans going forward in the future, even to attract the types of people you're going to want to hire next year. And bottom line, like we said, the hiring and onboarding processes need to be looked at right now in order for you to have time to make those changes for 2021. So where do you start? Where do you start to consider the changes you want to make? Well, the first one is in actually streamlining your current selection process. And what I mean by streamlining is making things more efficient, because you're going to have a lot less options working in a more virtual hybrid setting than you did before, when you had people come into the office for face-to-face interviews. And you want to also consider the cost of the selection process as well. So the first variable, if you're working with, let's say, your recruiting team or a team of people around what do we have to modify in our selection process now that we're going to be a hybrid workforce, which I think we've all agreed at this point in time. The first one being deciding where the job can be located. And this is an interesting question because we never used to think about it before, right? We'd say, okay, well, the corporate office is here. And so of course we're going to hire people who are within, 60 miles or a commutable distance to our office. Well, that no longer exists, right? So you have other options. So in deciding where the job deciding where the job can be located, some questions you can ask yourself are, can the job be done remotely? Does this job have to be near our customers for any reason? Does it have to be near our suppliers for any reason? Or does it really have to be located at corporate? It doesn't mean you're moving it, you're just considering these questions for a certain type of work. Another factor to think about is if you do decide, okay, this job could be done remotely, what level of experience does the candidate have to have in order to be able to perform that job more independently? Because if the person is operating in a remote setting, they're not going to have access to someone right down the hall, or those face-to-face interactions that might be able to help someone. So a job that could be more entry level in the past, you may even change the requirements and say, okay, for this role going forward, if we're going to recruit remotely in any part of the United States, or in that case, any part of the world, even, it could be considered. What's it going to take in terms of skill level for that person to be able to work effectively and productively on their own, or more independently at a minimum? Another question to think about is, could the job be done remotely if it's technology assisted? So if we changed our technology and had better technology support, do people really have to be in the same place at the same time? So for example, I recently talked to one of our clients who had a finance group that worked together in the same office, and they actually did their monthly reconciliations in person with each. There's still a lot of paper going around, and people talking to each other about discrepancies and so on and so forth. So how could that possibly be changed if they had better technology to support that financial reconciliation? It's a question that could ask if they wanted to move those job roles externally. We talked also about the workplace preferences of the valued employees, as well as the talent pool that's available in various locations. So, for example, many years ago, I worked with a number of companies who were doing video gaming and had been involved in development of video games. And I learned that there was a talent pool of those types of developers in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I didn't know that, okay, until we started working with a company there, and other companies popped up in Canada. And we began to see the attraction of companies starting and forming because the talent pool was available there that they needed to do the work. So now your company has this kind of flexibility and could consider recruiting people in other areas, not where your corporate offices are. So very interesting process to go through for the various jobs you plan to hire for next year. Excuse me. In addition, you want to make sure if you're not using the applicant tracking system right now, you might want to consider one. And for those of you who might not know what this is, it's a system where you can actually manage your work process around sourcing, recruiting, and onboarding with a platform that will send out reminders and communications to your external candidate base, and also to internal people to make sure that everything is moving quickly and that you have that short time to hire. So an applicant tracking system would be very effective and helpful with this remote work environment, especially if you have an onboarding module that can help you handle some of the logistics of getting badges assigned or paperwork signed, computer equipment requisitioned, and things like that before the person starts, and getting them set up in a work at home environment. We're seeing a move towards more mobile friendly applications. So in this particular case, for example, one of our clients is using a background check company that is technology focused and mobile first. And this particular company allows a job candidate to download an app on their smartphone and actually track their background check in terms of what is going on, whether or not all the references have come through, whether or not the criminal background check has been completed, whether or not the employment references have responded. So this takes the burden of staff time in responding to applicants calling off your internal staff. And it also gives a technology assist to try to shorten the amount of time it takes to do that background check. So we're seeing more mobile friendly applications as well in onboarding and even in video interviews being able to be done off of your mobile phone. That's something to think about as well. Virtual interviewing platforms, we already saw a move towards those earlier before the pandemic. Now they're almost essential. There are a lot of them out there that you can look at, and something to consider if you're not using them already. They're much more effective than Zoom because they're very functionality that is related to interviewing that you can use on those platforms. Team interviews. So one of the challenges in the hybrid workforce is you have some people who are working together and some people who aren't face to face. And there is a lack of, I would say, touch points for getting the cultural fit aspect of selection in place because of the hybrid workforce. So having team interviews, many of you were probably doing those before, but if you weren't, is more important now because it's a two-way street. You want to have your applicant as well as the employer evaluating whether or not this is going to be a good situation for both sides. And so the more people that your applicant can meet, that they're going to be working with, even remotely, then the better, because we're trying to maintain that glue of, we call it the head and the heart. So it's not only enough for the person to know what they need to do to be successful in the job, but they also have to have those relationships and relying on other people to get things done internally. So the team interviewing becomes a lot more of a focus here than ever before. And finally, just overall, as a guideline to start thinking more digitally and more technology assisted hiring processes. So let's turn our attention now to what you're looking for. And this is one of the key variables in selection anyway. The first thing you want to answer before you even start resume screening is being very clear, not only with yourself, but also with your interviewing team on what it is you're looking for. And in a hybrid environment, it's not only the job skills that the person has, which you would always look for anyway, but there are now some personal and behavioral attributes that you want in a person that are more pronounced than ever before. So for example, you want to look at how adaptable they are to change, both in the work situation and being asked to do things on the fly, because that is kind of how the new normal is going to be next year as we're coming out of this pandemic. We really don't know even the nature of the work some of us will be doing or where it's going to be located. So you need someone who's very flexible and adaptable and not resistant to change. Someone who has independent troubleshooting skills, because if you're working, let's say, on a flexible work schedule because you have families, obligations you're trying to juggle in the middle of the day because your kids are working from home, maybe you're working at 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night and your system goes down. Is this somebody who's going to be able to troubleshoot that and stay productive during those work hours, or not? You know, this is not only technology troubleshooting, but customer problems as well, because you may not have the level of group or team support that you might once had during a more regular work schedule or working in an office. Resilience goes without saying. We've all certainly had to be adaptable and resilient these last 7 or 8 months, and that's likely to continue. Very strong communication skills, both written and verbal. Yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with someone who did not have these skills verbally, and it was, I'm just going to say, personally torture, because by the end of the meeting, everyone on the Zoom call was almost screaming at this person because they just didn't, it wasn't just their language and ability to be understood that way, but they didn't know how to use the technology. So they were on mute half the time, and they had to pick up their headphone mic and talking it this way. And it was just really excruciating. So communication skills in a virtual setting become very important, as well as writing skills, because you're trying to explain things more on email and in documents than ever before. You can't just go down the hall and talk to somebody the way that you could in an office environment. Ability to prioritize and organizational skills, very related to the troubleshooting skills, because you don't have a manager in some cases that you can count on a regular basis daily to help keep you focused on the most important tasks that you need to do to hit your goals. So someone who can prioritize and organize and shift priorities on a rapidly changing basis, making the right choices, is going to be really key for the type of people who will make it in a hybrid work environment. Reliability. Early on in the pandemic, we did some webinars on how to successfully work from home and also how to successfully manage people who are remote workers. And I can tell you that the managers who came to those sessions were very concerned about whether or not the person working from home was really working. I don't think those concerns are valid, but the managers were worried about that. And so having an employee that is reliable, meaning that you can reach them when they agree they can be reached, and they're doing the work and hitting the deadlines that you need, is more important than ever, because you can't see them working. You have to focus more on the deliverables and their availability. Someone who's tech savvy, we've already given a lot of examples of that today. And then team skills, because just because you're working remotely or in a hybrid setting doesn't mean that you are not working in a team. So does this person know how to work collaboratively if they're in a remote location? I mean, that might be a good interviewing skills type of question to ask. Tell me about a time that you needed to collaborate with other team members when you were working from home, and see what they have to say about how they went about doing that, because that's still very much needed, even if you're not physically sitting shoulder to shoulder with your peer. For managers and leaders, same kind of thing. You need some of those skills, but in addition, someone who is good at understanding team dynamics and can kind of read cues and signals amongst team members, even if they can't see them remotely, right? How do you do that? Managing and engaging those teams. If someone's working and you can't see them, how do you keep that rowboat, tied to the dock and not let it drift off into the middle of the lake away from everybody untethered? That's a particular skill a leader or manager needs to have. For example, we saw an emergence on this particular trait for leaders of a best practice, which is actually daily huddle calls that some companies are now doing that didn't do them before, and recognizing that everyone on the team is working remote. And so at 8 o'clock each day, or whatever time it is, they start the day with a kickoff call that takes 10 to 15 minutes. And everyone goes around and talks about what they did yesterday or what they're going to be focused on today, anything they need help on, any escalations, things like that. And everyone leaves the kickoff huddle call for the day with a very clear idea of what they need to focus on and what other team members are going to be doing. And they do that every day. So that was the idea of somebody that is managing a remote team, and they didn't do that before. I think they had weekly staff meetings in the past, and so they recognized that even a change in the cadence and activity was needed to keep that team aligned and working together. Again, strong communicators, someone who is comfortable managing to deliverables. So what we mean by this is that you recognize as a manager that each job on your team is there because they're making a contribution to the business, to the organization in some tangible manner, whether it be a report, a certain level of customer service they're providing to your clients, sales, um, marketing, collateral, whatever it is that is produced by the job. Those are the things that you're going to be focusing on as a manager, the contributions and the deliverables, not so much when the person's working. Okay, so this is, we could have a whole webinar just on this, but the manager needs to be comfortable with the idea that the work may be done from any location and on any schedule that the employee chooses or needs to implement, and it's the results and deliverables that really count. Takes a certain switch in perspective, let's put it that way. Coaching goes without saying. Someone who can eliminate red tape. So there are a lot of challenges in people working remotely and in a hybrid setting, because it's just harder to get things done. And we've all experienced that, I'm sure, trying to get customer service from some organizations out there. Or here in California, unfortunately, it's impacted our employment development department that administers unemployment. That's a whole other story. But the manager may need to step in and be able to advocate on the part of their employee and team a lot more than they ever did before. So someone who has good influence skills and can help smooth the process for the rest of the group to be successful, more important than ever. It's a great time for innovation because adversity is the mother of invention, right? Or necessity is the mother of invention. And we've seen some wonderful innovation come out of the need to survive as organizations. So a manager that can really embrace challenges as a way to look and do something different and motivate their team to come up with new ideas that can deal with any obstacles that the team faces is someone you want, someone who can help facilitate new ideas and innovation in your organization, and can make quick decisions on the fly and know how to engage a new team member. So the reason I bring this up in the course of a selection webinar is because you may need to change the types of interviewing questions that you're asking to select these people who have these kinds of attributes. Not that they weren't important before, but these are some of the attributes that make for a more successful remote and hybrid worker or manager. And so you need more people who have these types of skills already in place. So the next thing to think about is questions that not only relate to the personal characteristics or behavioral attributes of the individual, but also culture. Because one of the challenges we've heard from managers today is, how do I keep my culture intact when people aren't working together, right? You know, what's going to happen to the organizational culture? You know, people can't see the symbols and the icons, or, you know, what the person next to them is doing and how they do it. So how does my culture stay alive, right? Well, one way is to hire people who have attributes related to things you value in your culture. So let's say hypothetically you have corporate values. You know, you have 4 or 5 values that the organization holds dear and actually exhibits on a day-to-day basis. So maybe there are things like integrity or quality or compassion, or, you know, whatever those cultural values are. You want to make sure in the selection process that you have a clear picture of whether or not that individual's values match what your organization stands for and how you want to do business. And again, you know, this would be important before, when everyone worked face-to-face, but in a face-to-face environment, if you're a sociologist, you understand this, but people are many times a product of the system that they work in. So if you go to work at a company, you will become more like the other people that work there. And that is because of social cues and things like social learning that Albert Bandura, as a psychologist, came up with. People imprint and role model what they see others do, especially others who are in recognized successful or leadership positions, right? Do as I do, not as I say. So this becomes a little watered down in a a remote work environment. So what that means is that you want to make sure you hire people who already match to some degree those values that your culture represents, because it'll make it a lot easier to sustain the culture you want if you're bringing people on who are aligned with it. Also, something to look at is in the interviewing process, we have received, or many people have received, some training or education around what legally you can and can't ask. And unfortunately, legal lags reality. And so this remote work situation is fraught with potential liability from an interviewing standpoint. So for example, you cannot ask, do you have kids at home that you're trying to manage while during normal work hours? Now that might be a question that, obviously someone interviewing would want to ask, but you can't ask that, right? Because, it's a situation that the person may or may not have, but it's not legal to ask those kinds of questions. What you can ask is things like, here's the hours we expect you to be available for clients. Is there any reason that you might not be available or be able to provide those types of services during a 9 to 5 workday? Okay. And that's because that's what we're expecting, is your availability during those hours. So I think it's time, a long way of saying that, to brush up on the legal, what to avoid and what you can and can't ask questions, and see how those relate to the new hybrid or remote work environment that this position is going to be in. And that way you can help avoid potential liability or lawsuits for your organization. As far as improving the selection process, you might want to think about, if you're not already, integrating some type of assessments, not as a replacement for selection and the good practices you already do, but to help shore up or augment for some of these things we're talking about. Many assessments are out there that can help you look at behavioral or personality attributes, how the person will do the job, whether or not they have good problem solving skills, whether or not they are going to like working in the type of work environment that you're thinking about this job being located. So we'd encourage you to look at assessments as another variable that you might want to bring into the process, not to complicate things, but to actually help make decisions on this type of position that may be newly configured for the work environment we're going to be in. There's a lot of them out there. Working as a team to get the best fit. So this is going into a little bit of what we already talked about, but doing the team interviewing, right? But it's also making sure that if you're going to change some of the questions that you used to ask because of the new work situation, that making sure that the team, the interviewing team, is clear on what they're looking for. And not only in terms of the overall profile of the person, but let's say you have 4 people on an interviewing team. You want to have one group asking maybe about prior job experience. You might want to have another group looking for cultural fit. You might want to have another person looking for the personal or values attributes, so that the job candidate doesn't get the same questions from 4 different people. Right. So working as a team and making that team selection process more efficient, making sure that the team knows ahead of time what the criteria is going to be for evaluating this applicant. Maybe having a scoring system that everybody is aligned with. What makes for a 3 on this versus a 1? How do we know the difference between those scores? And then finally, a process for evaluating the applicant after all the selection steps have been initiated. I will say part of the Hiring Winning Talent program does cover team-based interviewing. It's a big central part actually of the experience for those of you who may be familiar with it from Vital Learning. But it's important in this work situation to incorporate a lot of those best practices so you get a good cultural fit. And having a process, maybe some tools and forms for helping in that final decision making when you are evaluating the applicant. Assessments can be helpful as well, because many of the assessment tools will give you a report of multiple candidates and see how they stack up on the assessment measures compared to one another. But overall, asking yourself, do we have a process that everyone understands for making a final team decision or an offer to a particular candidate? How tight is that? How relevant is it to our remote and hybrid work environment? There are some best practices for conducting these virtual interviews that you want to put in place, just like best practices. We're seeing some Zoom articles, on the type of lighting you need to have in, how to avoid audio problems, these kinds of things, how long the virtual interview should be. So there may be some training that you need to do with your interview team around how to do effective virtual interviews, as well as the process for evaluating a decision making that we already talked about. Now, this topic, virtual onboarding experience, we actually do a webinar just on this one topic. So obviously in the next 10 minutes, we're not going to have time to go into all the detail on this, but I will give you some tips that first of all, you need a virtual onboarding experience, because if you were the type of company that, let's say, had a once a month in-person classroom experience for new employees, or NEO, some people call it new employee orientation, and at first Monday of every month, that's not happening anymore, especially if you've got for up to 40% or more of your people working remotely. So you do have to have a virtual onboarding experience and change up what you're doing. So one of the pitfalls of this is just companies that have decided, okay, I've got this in-person classroom thing, and I'm just going to throw it up on some PowerPoints and let people get oriented that way. No, this is not going to be an effective employee experience, right? So you want to consider what learning modifications need to be made, not only for the knowledge and information that people need to have to be successful in their role, but also the relationships they need to build during that first 90 days. So let's say you have some interactive, fun activities as part of your current onboarding. An example for a company where we helped to design the onboarding experience, they had a theme for their organization that was called Navigating at Such and Such Organization. And this particular company had a travel theme, right? So every new employee got it was fake, but it was basically a passport. Welcome to the such and such adventure. It's going to be like, a lot of excitement, like a traveling type of trip you're on. And they got a passport where they had to do a scavenger hunt and go find certain things or go meet with certain people. And every time that they did that, they got a stamp in their passport, like a country stamp when you go visit a country. So after you collected a certain number of those, you could go to a company intranet site and buy some swag items like coffee cups or hats, t-shirts, that kind of thing, which had the company logo and all of this. Um, so how do you replicate that in a virtual environment? Well, you can still have the same concept and idea, but maybe people are doing things virtually or they're looking for information on the web, right? Um, they can do that on their own and still have the same kind of experience, meet with people on Zoom or other virtual platforms, or even have just a regular old telephone call like the old days. Um, so a lot you can do, but the point is, don't get rid of those interactive, fun activities that are really a seminal key part of your onboarding that you cherish. Just find a way to do them virtually in a different way, and include that interactivity that you've always had. Okay, and the only other thing I want to say about virtual onboarding is a couple other things. One is we're seeing a move to using styles instruments in onboarding. A common one that's well known is the DISC tool. I'm not advocating any particular one, but this tool helps you to understand the motivations and the priorities of people you're working with on your team. So what better time to learn those than when you're new, right? You want to learn about what the preferences and priorities are of your manager's style. The manager might want to learn about what the priorities and preferences are for you as the new employee. And this is a great system to incorporate in the first actually 30 days of a new person's job, because it's part of that relationship building that we said was just as important as what the person needs to know from a knowledge standpoint about doing their new job. We are also seeing a rise or more use of what we might call remote listening tools. So some companies here in the Bay Area are implementing not pulse surveys, but daily surveys where the person is asked via text just a couple of quick questions. What are you struggling with today? How are you feeling today? Are you happy or not? Whatever it is, it's just a way to stay in touch and take the temperature of people who may not be physically visible to your work team. Some people are doing that via Slack and other vendors and providers that are out there for remote listening programs. And we're seeing a lot more of those now that people can't see each other. So overall, what you want to do is really leverage technology. And we're seeing that in many businesses who have collaborative software, or let's say sophisticated project management software, having a rise in their business. And that's because of now the hybrid work situation. And we're going to see more of this. And so if there are ways to think digitally about how to use technology to assist your work process, now is the time. Even the social aspect of selecting and hiring someone. In this particular slide, you see this little smiley face with the icon. That's from Slack Donut, which is a channel on Slack, which is a project-based team tool, where you can, as a new employee, let's say, in onboarding, say, okay, I work at Genentech or whatever organization you're working in, and I want to talk to somebody just to socially chat who also works at this company. And this tool will match you with different people from your organization and start a conversation between the two of you. So that's a way to have technology assist you in your selection and onboarding. Another technology related item we're seeing an increase of is chatbots. So if you don't know what a chatbot is, it's a pre-programmed text that someone gets on their smartphone. And so let's say you have chatbots set up for your first 90-day onboarding. You can pre-program those. So the new employee gets a text. It might say something like, hey, how you doing today? I'm, Oscar onboarding, because some people give these chatbots personalities, names. Okay. I'm Oscar onboarding, and we just checking to make sure you already signed up for your health benefits. If you haven't done so, please do it now. And here's the link, right in the chat that you touch, again, mobile first, and just sign up for your benefits right online there and then. So you can set that type of text up for any activity or phase that someone should be during their onboarding. And that's a great way to reach people virtually. So lots of opportunity for creativity and fun in this new normal. And what I'd like to do now is to both kind of summarize what we've said, but also hear from others. We don't have a really, really large crowd, but if you want to put down in the chat any thoughts you might have on ways you can improve your selection and onboarding during the new normal for 2021, please feel free to share that with everyone in the group. But the takeaways I'm hoping that you got from this session are: number one, there do need to be changes in your recruiting, selection, and onboarding processes for 2021. Now's the time to start thinking about this, to reimagine and redesign what you may have been doing last year or even earlier this year. You probably already made some of these changes, but what further changes can be done for preparation for when the new growth starts to happen and the economy starts picking up again, because it's likely that it will at some point next year. That's what all the predictions are saying. So be prepared and make sure your processes are in place, making sure that you've considered all kinds of things, like whether or not jobs can be done remotely, where you can recruit from, and how the communication needs to happen when you have some people working together in a physical office and others working remotely. How are you going to maintain an equal and transparent communication system with all of these folks all around potentially the world? It's a big question, and ripe for innovation and new ideas. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions that people on the call may have, or any takeaways you might like to share.
All right, well, we'll allow a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was fantastic. Great insights and tips, and a lot of thought-provoking things to be thinking about for the end of this year, going into 2021 and beyond. Because as Lynn talked about, just like how the work environment is likely going to change and shift, kind of adapt in the long term. In all likelihood, a lot of elements of hiring will as well. And so, thinking about these, being prepared for this, and thinking about, how your organization can adapt their hiring strategy is definitely something that is beneficial. So, thank you, Lynn, so much. Really appreciate it. If anybody thinks of any questions or items afterward, certainly feel free to reach out to Lynn or to myself if it's around the hiring kind of category. Lynn is definitely the best person to reach out to if you want to, for the next slide, Lynn, get your email up there. So if there are any questions that you have around hiring that Lynn might be able to help with, or that myself or the Vital Learning team might be able to help with, please let us know. If you are looking at training as it relates to hiring and retaining talent, there are 2 courses that we have that were actually written by Lynn Ware that Vital Learning offers in our solution set. One of them is called Hiring Winning Talent. The other one is called Retaining Winning Talent. The Hiring Winning Talent course, as Lynn mentioned in her presentation, covers team-based hiring as well as all the crucial elements of that hiring process. So it's a great thing to get brushed up on, get people skilled in, and to have not just hiring managers but other folks on the team be able to do effectively. So if that's something you're interested in and rolling out at your organization, please reach out as well.
Here's a question from Adam for everybody on the chat. Do we think that companies that embrace having remote workforce will start to evaluate what they pay employees? For example, a person who used to work is hired in Silicon Valley, but now lives in Montana. Will the company change what they pay? Now, this is a very good question and something that we've been talking about. I think that in the long run, it is a risk that employees take. So we've been hearing a lot of employees talking about how great it is that maybe they don't have to work in an office. Now they can live anywhere. In the Bay Area, what that means is that you don't necessarily have to pay your high real estate prices anymore, which are, kind of out of this world out here. But the risk is that if you do take that move, at some point, the compensation people are going to come in who have the different matrices of what they pay in certain regional areas, and you probably are at risk. Also, I would argue that there's risk for promotion as well, because in a hybrid situation, the manager is going to be working possibly with some people shoulder to shoulder, but others maybe not. And so how do you stay visible and kind of top of the team if you're remote and don't go to lunch with people like you used to, and all of that. So it's going to be an interesting journey that we're on. And I think at the end of the day, everyone has to ask themselves what they want out of work, what they want, out of their lifestyle, because there will be more options now than there were before. That's for sure. But you have to figure out what's important to you as an employee and find a situation that matches that. Good question, Adam.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's the only question that we have in today. Again, if there are anything else that you want you're curious about, you want more information about, any questions that kind of pop up later, feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to answer any questions that come up. So with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today. A big thank you to Lynn for sharing all of your thoughts and insights. Really appreciate all the great information that you took us through, and hope everybody found that valuable.
Absolutely. And please consider both of us a resource in your professional network. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, I love doing that. So we're here for you and glad to be a resource for any problems or issues you might have in your companies or with your clients.
Certainly.
And everybody take care and have a great weekend. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween.
Yep, definitely. All right. See you, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.